with a snub-nosed .38 revolver. The first time a doctor was murdered by the modern anti-abortion terrorist movement in America was March 1993. Anti-abortion demonstrators were protesting at a clinic in Pensacola, Florida. As Dr. David Gunn arrived at the clinic, a young man named Michael Griffin shot Dr. Gunn several times in the chest with a snub-nosed .38 revolver. Michael Griffin, the killer, became a cause celeb among anti-abortion extremists. He was associated with a group called Rescue America, which said after Griffin killed Dr. Gunn that while they did not condone the killing, they didn't condemn it either. 5 months after Dr. David Gunn was killed, another doctor, George Tiller, yes, the same George Tiller from today's headlines, was shot by a woman named Shelley Shannon. Shannon had written letters of support for Michael Griffin, who killed Dr. David Gunn. She'd called him a hero. In 1992 and 1993, Shelley Shannon set fires and used acid to attack at least 10 abortion clinics in Oregon, California, Idaho, and Nevada. In 1993, she went to Wichita, Kansas, and used a semi-automatic pistol to shoot Dr. George Tiller in each of his arms outside the clinic at which he worked. While she was in prison, Ms. Shannon signed on to a pledge of support for Paul Hill, the murderer of yet another American doctor. In June 1994, Paul Hill shot to death Dr. John Britton and a 74-year-old clinic escort named James Barrett, and he seriously wounded Mr. Barrett's wife. 6 months later, a man named John Salvi walked into 2 clinics in Brookline, Massachusetts, and killed 2 receptionists and wounded 5 other people. In January 1998, yet another murder. Security guard Robert Sanderson was killed, and a nurse named Emily Lyons was critically injured by a nail bomb that exploded at an Alabama abortion clinic at which they worked. That bomb was planted by a man named Eric Rudolph. Eric Rudolph had also bombed another abortion clinic and a gay bar in Atlanta the year before, and he had famously bombed the Atlanta Olympics the year before that, killing Alice Hawthorne and wounding 111 other people. The Atlanta Olympics bombing was a terrorist act committed by an anti-abortion extremist. In October 1998, another murder. In Amherst, New York, Dr. Barnett Slepian was standing inside his house when James Kopp shot and killed him with a sniper rifle. Kopp was a member of an anti-abortion extremist group that calls itself the Lambs of Christ. And then yesterday, George Tiller was shot again. This time it was inside his church in Wichita. He was killed instantly. A man named Scott Roeder is the suspect in custody in this case. He's known in extremist anti-abortion circles. He has had writings published in a newsletter called Prayer and Action News, which promotes the idea of killing people who provide abortion services as justifiable homicide. Someone calling himself Scott Roeder had participated in anti-abortion discussions at a website of the group called Operation Rescue. The group's founder, Randall Terry, spoke at the National Press Club today and celebrated Dr. George Tiller's death.
I stand before you today saying about George Tiller what I said in his life. He was a mass murderer. George Tiller was a mass murderer. He killed tens of thousands of innocent human beings at his own hand. George Tiller was a murderer, and he was doing something that was literally demonic.
Another anti-abortion extremist group, Operation Save America, also put out a statement celebrating George Tiller's murder today, saying, quote, "He is now bowing before Jesus and confessing that Jesus is right and that he, George Tiller, was wrong." If you go to the website of the Army of God, you will find hagiographic websites for anti-abortion terrorist movement heroes like Paul Hill and Eric Rudolph and Shelley Shannon. You can actually scroll through pages and pages of mugshots and descriptions of bombings and shootings and murders and attempted murders, all praising the perpetrators and even suggesting ways to get away with the same types of crimes that these people committed, but you could do it without getting caught. On their front page today, there's Dr. George Tiller, just murdered. Under the caption, "The lives of innocent babies scheduled to be murdered by George Tiller are spared by the action of American hero Scott Roeder." There's an anti-abortion terrorist movement in the United States that operates relatively openly. They advocate and their members commit acts of violence, including murder, against Americans who are not breaking the law, who are engaged in protected legal activity on American soil. These acts of violence are politically motivated. They are designed to change American policies and to terrorize Americans. They have succeeded in making providing abortion services to American women so dangerous, so intimidating, that there are only a handful of doctors in the entire country who provide late-term abortions, as Dr. Tiller did, abortions late in pregnancy. Burgess said that Back in April, the Department of Homeland Security was lambasted by conservatives for publishing a report on the potential for violence from right-wing extremist groups. It was the Bush administration that had actually commissioned the report, and they had done one on the potential for violence from left-wing groups too, but that did not stop conservatives from getting very, very angry about that report. At least 3 Republican members of Congress, Michelle Bachmann, John Carter, and Michael Burgess, said that Homeland Security Secretary Janet Napolitano should actually be fired or should resign for having issued that report. Republican Minority Leader John Boehner said the report meant that Napolitano had an awful lot of explaining to do. Well, that report actually warned for the potential for violent behavior from far right-wing groups and individual issues, such as opposition to abortion. DHS got even more specific in March, warning about, quote, anti-abortion extremism groups and sovereign citizen movements, such as a group called the Free Men. We now know that the man who is the chief suspect in the killing of Dr. George Tiller was reportedly associated both with extremist anti-abortion groups and with the sovereign citizen movement known as the Free Men. Still think Janet Napolitano ought to resign for that outrageous warning about guys like Scott Roeder?
Tiller, the baby killer out in Kansas, acquitted today of